A warm welcome back to the Uxbridge FM History Show, and we're very pleased to welcome back Ken Pearce, whose story today concerns the local canals. Hi Ken, nice to see you again.
Hello. In 1793, Parliament was considering the Grand Junction Canal Act. The front page of it reads like this: An Act for maintaining a navigable canal from the Oxford Canal navigation at Braunston in Northampton to join the River Thames at or near Brentford in the county of Middlesex, and also certain collateral cuts from the said intended canal. There was already, you see, a considerable canal network in the Midlands, but the aim of this project was to link those canals with a direct route to the River Thames and therefore with London. The Act was passed by Parliament, and it is clear that a great deal of preparatory work had already been done, because work began immediately on May the 1st. The first sod was cut to the south of Uxbridge in the district called Uxbridge Moor, and it is thought that about 3,000 navigators, or navvies, were employed in the work. 18 months later, the section between Brentford and Uxbridge was opened. A contemporary account reads like this: That part of the Grand Junction Canal from the River Thames near Brentford to the town of Uxbridge was opened on the 3rd of November for coal and all such sorts of merchandise to be navigated thereon, comprising upwards of 12 miles to this great undertaking. The opening of this part of the canal was celebrated by a variety of mercantile persons of Brentford, Uxbridge and Rickmansworth and their vicinities, forming a large party attended by a band of music with flags and streamers and several pieces of cannon in a pleasure boat belonging to the Corporation of London, preceding several barges laden with timber, coal and other merchandise to Uxbridge. The section from Uxbridge to Braunston was not so straightforward, and that wasn't ready until 1805. A long tunnel was necessary at Blisworth, but it collapsed and delayed the opening, and the gradients to the north were steeper as well. And there was also danger with canal construction that the water level would get low. So at Ruislip, a hamlet with a few cottages was bought by the Canal Company, and it was flooded to form a reservoir. We know it today as Ruislip Lido. The canal passed over the River Frey twice, so a word about that particular waterway. The main stream, the River Colne, is to a great extent the boundary between Middlesex and Bucks, and in the medieval period there was a small tributary of the Colne that ran through Uxbridge, but it was only a very small stream. About the year 1450, a man called John Frey appeared on the scene. He had been involved in work on the River Lee in North London and now turned his attention to our area. John Frey soon realised that it would be possible to divert some of the water from the Colne to join up to this minor stream. This was done, and the result is popularly known now as Frey's River. F-R-A-Y'(S) is the correct term. So it is mostly still a natural waterway, but a small section is man-made. But why go to all this bother? Well, Uxbridge was a market town, principally for the corn trade. Corn was brought into the town, sold, and then had to be milled, and the more flour mills, the better. Frey's River now had sufficient flow of water to drive mills, and so 3 were added: Fountains Mill, Cowley Mill near Cowley Mill Road, and a mill in Old Mill Lane in Cowley. On the canal, Denham Lock was constructed to pass over the Freys. Further south, Cowley Lock was formed to pass over the Freys on its return to join the main stream of the Colne at West Drayton. In July 1801, a branch from the canal was opened at Bull's Bridge to the Paddington Basin. Another contemporary account reads, "Yesterday, a week ago, the canal to Paddington was opened for trade with a grand procession to Bull's Bridge. Exactly at 9 o'clock, the committee with their friends in 2 pleasure boats set sail with colours and streamers flying, each vessel being towed by 2 horses. At 12 o'clock, the company were met by the city shallop, that's a light open boat, and several pleasure boats. On meeting, a salute was fired, and then the procession returned. At half after 5 o'clock, the cavalcade reached the great dock. This was announced by the firing of a cannon on Westbourne Green Bridge and a volley of musketry from the town." Soon after the opening of this branch, a packet boat service began to operate between Paddington and Uxbridge. The boats carried packets and parcels, but the main idea was to offer day trips from London to the countryside of West Middlesex. An advert of that period reads, "A most delightful, luxuriant and rural country, well ornamented in many parts by noblemen's and gentlemen's seats, rivers, canals, parks, woods and gardens. Return fare from London to Uxbridge is 5 shillings. Tea and coffee, etc., may be had on board." In their 1818 history of Uxbridge, George Redford and Thomas Riches report, "Packet boats were first introduced in 1801, and they continued to pass regularly between Uxbridge and London at stated hours every day during most of the year for the conveyance of passengers and parcels. But the passage was 23 miles and found too long, and when the novelty ceased, the boats were discontinued. Several subsequent attempts have been made to revive them without success. Nevertheless, one place of refreshment opened at Cowley and was called the Paddington Packet Boat, a public house which, sadly, last year closed down. But above all, of course, the canal brought industrial development to our area, and even today the factory areas remain along the canal for the most part: Harefield, Uxbridge, Cowley, Useley, West Drayton, and the southern part of Hayes. Docks and wharves appeared along the banks. It's notable that areas not on the canal, like Ruislip and Ickenham, remain very rural communities with little industrial development, and therefore they remain largely residential areas today as a result of the spread of metro land. The canal was ideal for transporting bulky goods. Into the area came coal, timber and slate. At Harefield, a company making sheet copper for the Royal Navy began trading. In Uxbridge, there was a plate glass works and oil and mustard mills. But it wasn't just goods coming into the area. At this period, Uxbridge was still a major corn market, and mills on the nearby waterways were producing quantities of flour, and this commodity could now be transported by canal. To the south of our district, the clay soil was suitable for brick making, especially in Cowley, Useley, and a little further east in a district known as Starvall. The industry had been in existence for centuries, but now large quantities of bricks could be transported to London, in particular, by canal. Incidentally, the brickmakers lived in pretty squalid conditions, but they did have the courage to protest about the name of their area. Starvall suggested that they were near starvation level. So, because they were making stock bricks, the district was renamed Stockley. And some of you can remember, perhaps, what the landscape was like down there before the development of Stockley Park. I must mention one major change to the south of Uxbridge, in the district known as Uxbridge Moor. Throughout the 18th century, it became a major sporting area for athletics, horse racing and cricket, and other minor activities such as cockfighting. In September 1720, the Daily Courant advertised a meeting at Uxbridge. It reads, "On Wednesday, the 14th instant, a piece of plate of 4 guineas value will be given gratis to be jumped for at 3 standing jumps, 6 standing jumps, hop, step and jump. The best 2 in 3 on Uxbridge Moor by any person who enters his name with Mr. Sergeant of the Crown Inn the Monday before," where these articles may be seen. There is a horse race. Notice, there is a horse race the same day for a £30 plate. There would also be cocking, in other words, cockfighting. All these activities will be opportunities for gambling, and a considerable crowd gathered from London to partake by the canal. This carried its own dangers. A few days after the event, the Daily Post reported, "On Friday night about 10 o'clock, a gentleman said to be a brewer, returning from the horse races at Uxbridge, was set upon 2 highwaymen between Acton and Hayes, who robbed him of a considerable sum of money and made off. But afterwards, upon some suspicious thoughts presented by a guilty mind, they turned back, carried him down a narrow lane and shot him." The earliest record of cricket being played down there was on August 21st, 1735, where a team of local players played against a team from Brentford and Acton for a wager of 40 guineas a side. Alas, the result is not known. The cutting of the canal across the site brought these sporting and unsporting activities to a close, but it's not long ago that there was still a pub in Cowley Mill Road called the Sportsman's Hall. Sadly, that has now disappeared. With industrial development along the canal came a demand for housing. But what was put up was for the most part pretty poor quality, especially in the area called Uxbridge Moor, which became a very rough area. When the Reverend Arthur Hilton arrived to become the vicar there in 1851, his carriage was stoned by local youths. And before him, there had been 5 vicars in 12 years. Hilton stayed for a remarkable 59 years, but he later wrote, "The moor had an evil reputation, and no one will come across the moor in the dark. Even in the daytime, if a carriage or decent person passed through, they were pelted with mud and stones. Even the clergymen were insulted. On Sundays, there was nothing but fighting and scandals of every kind." One reason for the rough character of the people on the moor in the old days was that before the present system of county constabulary, there were old parish constables who had little control. The River Colne divides the 2 counties of Middlesex and Bucks, so it was an advantage to the roughs to live near the border. If they got into the clutches of a constable on one side, they just crossed to the other and given a long immunity while the authorities in the 2 counties sorted themselves out. Law and order improved after our area came under the Metropolitan Police for the first time in 1840. In 1836, fuel brought in by the canal led to the opening of the Gasworks, as supplies began to the town from a site near the Dolphin Public House. This may be the first time, by the way, that the roads were dug up. In 1861, a second gasworks opened further south off Cowley Mill Road, and so temporarily there was a rivalry between 2 gas firms, but luckily it only lasted 3 years. Sanity prevailed, and the Uxbridge and Hillingdon Gas Consumers Company came into being on the Cowley Mill Road site. Another aspect of the canal, of course, was the transfer to our area of London's rubbish. Boatloads of rubbish from London were brought down and dumped by the side of the canal, especially in the Cowley area. I went on a bottle dig myself years ago now, and among the relics that I found was a piece of china labelled Marylebone Workhouse. So you can see that it was just a tip for London's rubbish. In the mid-19th century, the well-known canal firm of Fellows, Morton and Clayton acquired a site off Waterloo Road. They were principally coal merchants and canal carriers, but by 1881 they had begun to build canal boats at the Uxbridge site, and repair work continued there until after World War I. In 1881, a branch from our main canal was opened to Slough, principally for the brick trade. In 1900, the Uxbridge Electricity Supply Company began to build a generating plant by the canal off Waterloo Road. So in 1902, this new form of power became available, expensive of course. And of course, the coal for the power station was brought in by the canal. Not far away was the Steel Barrel Company as well. They opened, making barrels, drums, kegs, metal containers of all kinds. And of course, that business went on for a long time, so that after World War II, they were actually manufacturing aircraft refueling tankers. Another firm that came nearby on the canal was the Bell Punch Company in 1919. They came from London to take over a former flour mill on the canal side. The firm was established in 1878 in London, manufacturing a ticket machine, which proved very successful, used by bus and tram conductors in this country and abroad. So the firm took over a 35-acre site, and in the period that followed, they branched out into cinema tickets and machines, totalizators, and eventually adding machines. And after World War II, they developed Sumlock comptometers and the first handheld calculators. The company then became known as Control Systems and was taken over eventually by Lamson Industries, but they left Uxbridge in 1976. The site is now the Riverside Trading Estate. In 1927, the Grand Junction Canal was bought by the Regent's Canal Company, and the canal was then renamed the Grand Union Canal. By the 1930s, however, there was a decline in canal transport. Competition from road and rail was too great. Some canals, like the Kennet and Avon, for example, were closed. Our canal managed to survive. And after the Second World War, it came under the British Transport Commission. About this time, Fellows Morton and Clayton ceased trading in Uxbridge. What gradually happened from then onwards was the realization that canal could be used for leisure. In 1962, the canal came under the wing of the British Waterways Board. By 1980, commercial use had virtually disappeared, although lime juice was still being carried from Brentford to Boxmoor. In the 1990s, leisure use increased rapidly. Moorings with permanent homes became a fixture along canal banks. The Fellows Morton and Clayton Yard became Uxbridge Boat Yard, repairing and servicing the leisure vessels which are now being used. Marinas opened at Uxbridge, Cowley and Yedding. In 2012, the local canal came under the wing of the Canal and River Trust. At one time, nobody wanted to live by the canal. It was dirty, filthy, commercial. Now it's another story. A waterside home has become popular. Trading estates, much cleaner, have arisen as well. And in addition, the canal has come to be a valuable part of the Colne Valley Regional Park, an area stretching from Rickmansworth Rickmansworth to the Thames for conservation and leisure use.